My husband texted me just as I was collecting our bags from the carousel. The airport was crowded, bustling with people rushing to and from their gates. And my son, Eric, was tugging at my sleeve, eager to get home after our week-long trip to visit my sister. I read the message on my phone, and my stomach dropped. I'm here. Walk back home for 3 hours. I stared at the screen, feeling the blood drain from my face. What did he mean? Walk back home? For 3 hours? Mom? Eric tugged on my sleeve again. He was only 7. But he could sense when something was wrong. His eyes, so much like his father's, were full of innocent concern. When's Dad coming? I smiled down at him, trying to hide my panic. He's just outside. Sweetheart. Let's go. My mind was racing. What had prompted this? Just 2 weeks ago, everything had seemed fine between us. Sure, there had been tension, there always was when you had a marriage as long as ours, but nothing like this. I tried to replay our last conversation before I left, but all I could recall was a mundane exchange about Eric's school projects and picking up groceries. I pushed the luggage cart forward, Eric walking beside me, clutching the stuffed bear he always carried when we traveled. As we approached the exit, I spotted Jake's car. It was parked in the far corner of the drop-off zone, away from the hustle of the main entrance. I waved at him, but he didn't move. He just sat there, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Come on, Eric, I said, my voice tight. Let's go see Dad. As we neared the car, Jake rolled down the window. His face was hard, his jaw clenched, and his eyes cold. He didn't get out, didn't offer to help with the bags. He just sat there, watching me like a stranger. Jake, what's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned slightly toward the passenger side, his voice low and deliberate. Walk back home. I blinked. What are you talking about? 3 hours. Walk. His eyes flicked to Eric, and I noticed the way his expression changed. There was no malice there, no anger directed toward our son. But then his gaze snapped back to me, cold and unyielding. You can't be serious, I whispered, my throat tightening. Jake, we just got back from a week away. Eric's tired. I'm tired. What is this? His mouth twitched, almost like he was suppressing something, a smile. Anger. It was impossible to tell. This is what happens when you push too far. What does that even mean? Figure it out, he said, his voice sharp. He turned his gaze back to the road ahead, as if I wasn't even there. I swallowed, feeling a lump forming in my throat. What am I supposed to do? Jake? Just leave Eric here. You want me to walk home and leave him with you? Jake shook his head slowly, like I had said something stupid. Eric's not part of this. This is between you and me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked down at Eric, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes, his little fingers still gripping his bear. He didn't understand, but he could sense the tension. Jake, please. I tried again, my voice quieter, pleading. Can we talk about this? Whatever it is. Let's talk. Don't do this. But he wouldn't look at me. Get going. Claire. You've got a long walk ahead of you. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do. My heart was pounding. And the airport noise faded into the background. It was just me, Jake, and Eric, standing at the edge of something I didn't understand. Eric tugged at my hand again. Mom? I forced myself to kneel down, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Hey, sweetie. You're going to go home with Dad. Okay. I'll be right behind you. But why can't you come with us? His voice was small, confused. I couldn't tell him the truth, not that I even knew what the truth was. I smiled, though it felt like my face might crack. It's just a little game. Okay. I'm going to walk home. And we'll see who gets there first. His brow furrowed. But he nodded slowly. Trusting me. He trusted me. I hated that I was doing this to him. I kissed his forehead and stood up, meeting Jake's gaze one last time. He didn't say a word. Didn't move. Just stared at me with that unreadable expression. Don't make me do this, I whispered. But I knew it was pointless. Jake had made up his mind. With one last glance at Eric, I turned and walked away. My legs felt heavy, like I was moving through quicksand. Every step took me further from the safety of our life, from the family I thought I knew. The airport doors slid shut behind me, and the cool evening air hit my face. I pulled my coat tighter around me and started walking. The roads were busy. Cars zooming past, their headlights blinding in the twilight. I couldn't think. Couldn't make sense of what had just happened. 3 hours. Why 3 hours? What was Jake punishing me for? My mind replayed every argument, every tiny slight or misunderstanding, trying to piece together the reason for this. As I walked, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another cryptic message from Jake. But it wasn't him. It was my sister, Jenny. How was the flight? Her text read. Innocent. Casual. I stared at the screen, debating whether to tell her what had just happened. Jenny and I had grown closer over the years, especially after our parents passed away. She was the one I always turned to when things got tough. But this, how could I even begin to explain? Instead, I typed, "We just landed. Jake's picking us up." I didn't want to worry her. Not yet. The truth was, I didn't even know what to say. Was this a joke? Was Jake testing me? Or was it something more sinister? A sign of a deeper crack in our marriage that I hadn't noticed until now. As I walked, the sky darkened, and the familiar ache of exhaustion crept into my legs. I had never imagined myself in this situation, walking home from the airport while my husband and son drove ahead without me. I reached the edge of the city, where the sidewalks ended, and the quiet suburban streets began. The houses were dark, families inside winding down for the night. I passed a few joggers, a couple walking their dog. No one seemed to notice me. The woman walking alone in the dark, her heart heavy with questions she couldn't answer. 2 hours in, my feet throbbed, and my legs felt like they were going to give out. I stopped for a moment, leaning against a street lamp, the cold metal pressing into my back. My phone buzzed again. Almost there. Jake's message this time. Short. Cold. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone into the street and watch it shatter. But I couldn't. Eric was waiting for me at home. And whatever this was, I had to get through it for him. So I kept walking. The last hour passed in a blur of aching muscles and mounting anger. By the time I reached our street, My body was on autopilot. My mind a mess of confusion and hurt. The house was dark when I finally reached it. Jake's car was in the driveway, but the porch light was off. I stood there for a moment, catching my breath, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. I opened the door quietly, not wanting to wake Eric if he was already asleep. The house was silent, eerily so. I dropped my bag by the door and kicked off my shoes, my feet screaming in relief. Jake was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't look up as I entered. 3 hours, he said, his voice low. Right on time. I stared at him, waiting for an explanation that never came. Why? I finally asked, my voice shaking. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving the table. You figure it out. And with that, he stood up and walked past me, disappearing into the dark hallway without another word. I stood in the kitchen for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The house was still, and the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. My legs throbbed, my feet ached, and my heart pounded in my chest. I had just walked for 3 hours in the cold, after a long trip, after trusting that my husband would be there for me. But instead, he left me to make the journey on foot, without explanation. I wanted to follow him, to demand answers, to yell, to cry, to break down every wall between us until I understood. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not with Eric in the house, likely already asleep and blissfully unaware of the strange tension that was threatening to crack his world wide open. I took a deep breath and went to check on him. His door was slightly ajar, and the soft glow of his nightlight spilled out into the hallway. I pushed the door open gently, peeking in. Eric was fast asleep, curled up with his stuffed bear, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. My heart ached looking at him, knowing that I had to hold it together for his sake, even if my marriage was crumbling before my eyes. Closing his door softly, I returned to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. The coldness of it shocked me back into the present. I could feel the weight of everything settling into my bones, the exhaustion, the confusion, the hurt. And yet, I still had no idea why Jake had done this. What did he mean by pushing too far? I went over every argument, every moment in the last few months, trying to pinpoint what could have set him off. We had disagreements, like any couple, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. Or had I missed something? My phone buzzed again. A text. For a moment, my heart leapt, thinking it was Jake offering some kind of explanation. But when I picked up the phone, I saw it was from my sister. Jenny. Everything okay? You seemed a bit off earlier. I stared at her words, debating whether to tell her the truth. Part of me wanted to vent, to pour out every detail and let her help me make sense of it. But another part of me, the part that had spent years keeping up the facade of a perfect marriage, hesitated. Admitting something was wrong would make it real, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. After a long pause, I typed back, "Yeah. Just tired. Long day." It wasn't a lie. Exactly. Just not the whole truth. I put the phone down and stared at the empty kitchen. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second a reminder that Jake was still somewhere in the house. Waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. But I knew I couldn't avoid it forever.